Welcome to Local Matters. Today we're bringing you some fun things to do around our towns, a vaccination distribution forum by the Museum of Science, a free online concert broadcast live from the Museum of Fine Arts, and Poet Laureate Kathy Desjardins. But first, we begin with craft brewing. There are more than 200 operating breweries in the Commonwealth, and Julie invited Adam Romanow of the Massachusetts Brewers Guild and founder of Castle Island Brewing Company on to talk about the state of brewing in our state. Julie?
Adam Romanow, it is so good to have you with us today.
Thanks, Julie. Good morning.
Good morning. You are the Vice President and Treasurer of the Massachusetts Brewers Guild and the founder of Castle Island Brewing. So tell me, overall, what is the Brewers Guild to start with?
So the Mass Brewers Guild has been around for around a decade now. We're a 501c6 nonprofit that essentially works to advance the interest of craft breweries in Massachusetts. We're made up of around 200 members, breweries from throughout the Commonwealth, large and small, and we represent them on legislative matters. We host, in normal times anyway, multiple events throughout the year to better engage our consumers and advocate for the interest of the small breweries in the Commonwealth.
So how do I become part of this? What is the parameters that I have to meet to be qualified?
So Mass Brewers Guild members are all breweries licensed by the federal government, by the state government. So we're not a consumer-facing organization. That being said, when we host our events, we do engage consumers, and festivals are publicly ticketed. We usually invite thousands of people to come visit us when we host these events. But we do engage consumers throughout the normal year as well in other ways. We've got some events later this year that I think are going to be virtual again, given what's going on in the world. And we like to tell people, what breweries are here to do.
Okay, so the ultimate goal of someone who's in this is to create a beer or create beers that are purchased by restaurants and purchased by liquor stores. Is that true?
Essentially, yeah. So the Guild really exists to serve the member breweries and making sure that we're promoting and advancing their interest. Sometimes that does include, finding better ways to shape laws to allow for distribution to bars and restaurants. But a lot of times it's protecting and advancing the interests of breweries that actually don't distribute their beer and only sell it on site through tap rooms. Certainly we saw last year with all of the restrictions that COVID created, breweries had to get a little crafty in how they were selling and distributing their beer, and a lot of breweries had to turn to new on-site models. And the Guild was a huge help in advancing those interests to make sure that people were able to continue operating with all the COVID restrictions that were in place.
Right. I like how you use that crafty. That was very smart of you to do that. How did you get into this business yourself?
So I started brewing commercially back in 2010. I used to be in the consulting world, and I took a job at a brewery in New Hampshire for fun. 5 years later, I started Castle Island Brewing, and we opened here in Norwood at the end of 2015. And actually, one of the first things that we did when we opened up was we joined the Mass Brewers Guild. We really wanted to be part of a state trade organization that we knew, would be a great resource for knowledge sharing, for community building, but it's also a great way to stay plugged in and really understand the issues and the challenges that brewers are facing. We find that being part of that community has been a huge advantage for us, just kind of in staying on the leading edge and knowing what's going on in the world. So it was a pretty easy choice for us, wanting to be part of really the only trade organization in the state.
Right. Now, clearly you're slightly competition of each other, you independent craft brewery people, but you also have to band together. And what have you done specifically during COVID to band together more?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the things that draws a lot of people to this industry is the culture of friendly competition. Yes, we're all competing with each other, but there's a little bit of a David versus Goliath feel in going up against some of the larger breweries, in the world. So for us during COVID, I think there was a lot of feeling of in it togetherness, if you will. We have a very active Facebook group where guild members post all sorts of questions, needs for raw materials, needs for equipment, or even just looking for advice on business decisions. And I saw a lot more activity in that group over the last year as people were trying to navigate the pandemic and the effect of it. So I think knowledge sharing has been a really big way. I also know that a lot of breweries banded together by literally brewing beers together. Collaborations between breweries are very common in this industry. We saw a lot more of that last year with the pandemic. I think people were trying to find new ways to market their beer and connect with consumers, but also support each other because we're all feeling the same challenges, the same pinches. And I saw a lot of breweries working together, sometimes in person with masks on and socially distancing. But I even saw a number of collaborations come together last year virtually, where the two breweries were never in the same room at the same time, but over Zoom or FaceTime, whatever the medium was, put together a recipe, brewed it together, and released it together, even though they were physically separate.
That's fabulous. That's just wonderful how you guys can, and you say it's a friendly group. It reminds me of the local restaurants here in Plymouth that have banded together to try to help each other during this really hard time. What has this done to the bottom line of breweries? Have you seen an influx of income or customers versus it dying off? Because it seems that alcohol is prevalent no matter what happens in the world, but especially during a pandemic, people still like their drinks.
Yeah, I think from a consumption standpoint, alcohol is somewhat recession-proof or somewhat pandemic-proof. But what we've really seen is a shift in revenue streams because, we at Castle Island anyway, historically 50% of the beer that we distribute has been to bars and restaurants. And they've obviously felt some serious constraints with the virus and the restrictions that have been put in place. So we definitely saw a huge hit to our top line revenue and certainly our net income as well. I know a lot of other breweries are in a similar position. We did see some growth in bars and liquor stores and package stores with more people, isolating at home, even turning to alcohol delivery services. We saw a lot more growth in that arena. But for us, anyway, it didn't offset what we lost in bars and restaurants. For us, as well as a lot of other breweries, we also rely in large part on the performance of our tap room, which is our on-site, showroom where you can come and drink pints of beer right here. You can buy 4 packs of cans to go. And the capacity restrictions that we've seen put in place due to the pandemic really chopped down our revenue on the taproom side of the business. I know a lot of other breweries are in the same boat. So while, we've certainly seen people drinking a decent amount more at home, what we haven't seen is the consumption in bars, restaurants, and taprooms. And ultimately, I think for a lot of people, that's created some financial hardship that can't be offset by the growth in package stores.
Sure, absolutely. And hopefully we're going towards the end of where we've been, the darkest days, and brighter days are going to be ahead. Now, you have a Massachusetts Beer Week is coming up on March 6th. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's correct. So Mass Beer Week is something that's been going on for a few years now. This year it's taking place March 6th through March 13th. It's going to look a little different than it has in the past. In the past, breweries have tried to partner up with other breweries, with bars and restaurants to put together beer dinners and tap takeovers and all sorts of special in-person events. Given what's going on, that's obviously not happening this year, but we are calling on our members to host all sorts of online events. I know here at Castle Island, we're looking at partnering with another brewery that actually is a restaurant as well, and possibly doing a meal kit beer dinner with them. But I would also expect breweries to be doing virtual collaborations, online tastings, all sorts of interesting online programming that people can do from the safety and comfort of their own home. The Guild itself is also going to be hosting an annual event we've done for a few years now called Meet the Freshman Class that week. In the past, Meet the Freshman Class has been a ticketed in-person event where we bring together a number of breweries that have all opened within the last year. The way it's going to look this year is we're actually going to be still selecting a handful of breweries that are less than a year old, but we're going to be dedicating one day a week to each of them to do online virtual tastings with those breweries. And we'll be distributing shopping lists in advance so people can pick up the beers and then enjoy it from the comfort of their home.
Oh, what a great idea.
And then lastly, I would be remiss
Go ahead.
if I didn't mention, the Guild is also going to be selling Mass Beer Week t-shirts as well as glassware at partner breweries. So if you're looking for some awesome merch to support the Guild, keep an eye out for that.
Okie doke. What do you think that the future holds for breweries?
You know, it's a great question. I'm still bullish on what craft beer is capable of doing here in the state and beyond. You know, I think the next few months are certainly going to remain very tough. This spring is probably not going to be what it usually is, which in New England is a great time for people to kind of come out of their cold burrows and enjoy some sunshine and some cold beers in the sun. That's probably not going to be happening this year. My guess is we'll start to see things loosen up in the summertime. But I still think there's a lot of room for growth. You know, I talk to people every day who are new to craft beer, are just getting into it, who are enamored with it, who are kind of happy to be leaving, you know, big beer, as it were. So I still think there's a wealth of opportunity for breweries. And if we can all kind of hang together for the next few months and get through what is hopefully the last of the pandemic, I think we've got brighter days ahead.
That's great. And do you worry at all about almost too much saturation? Sometimes it gets to the point where there are so many choices that it's overkill. Does that ever come into your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I get that question a lot, and I used to think that saturation would be a problem, but the reality is we've got 220 breweries in the state and counting, and everyone still seems to be growing. I think the bigger thing in my mind, I'm not worried about oversaturation. I'm worried about quality. I think there's a lot of amazing beer being made in the state, but there's definitely some room for improvement with some of the newcomers, some of the people that maybe don't have the experience. I think as long as people are making amazing beer, there's really no limit on how many breweries we can support.
Well, that's wonderful. And we will end on that positive note, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
Back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Julie and Adam. For more information on the Mass Brewers Guild, visit massbrewersguild.org.